Hey everyone, Damron here. Today I want to talk all about the stress cycle and what its impact on hormones are. I know we've talked about this before on this channel, but I think it can't be talked about enough because it's so important and something that I see every single day with patients causing their symptoms. If you haven't hit the subscribe button yet, hit that button to be notified anytime I post new content relating to women's health, hormones, or holistic health. So I want to just give you a quick overview of this video today and what we're going to chat about. So we're first going to chat about stress and its causes. Where does stress come from? I have patients all the time that tell me that they have been working with different practitioners and they know their cortisol level, their stress hormones are off, and they are taking all these herbs and hormone replacement therapy and different things, and it's just like not doing anything over a year. And I think that a lot of people miss the boat on this. I think there's some unique and special ways and places that this stress comes from, and I want to let you in on it because it's so important to actually feel good and heal long term. Second, I want to teach you how to nourish your body with food. I know that food and nutrition is always such a nuanced conversation, but I think it is important to get those micronutrients in there like vitamins and minerals because that is how our body is going to be healed. Those are the spark plugs for every single thing that we do. And I know that eating healthy nutrition, at least sometimes, can be a huge help. Third thing we're gonna go over in this video is how to change your mindset. I think that this is always, there's a million different opinions on this as well. And I'm gonna give you my 2 cents on how to change your mindset, how to start perceiving the world as a more safe place instead of always so dangerous, so that your fight or flight response can take a little bit of a hiatus so that your body can produce the right hormones at the right time and make you feel better in things like energy, sleep, periods, moods, fatigue. All of those different things will start to get better if we can start to balance our hormones, which starts with how our brain is perceiving our world. If our brain's perceiving our world as someplace that's scary and dangerous and threatening, it's going to constantly be on high alert, hypervigilant, which is going to produce chemicals like cortisol and adrenaline, norepinephrine, instead of things like your calming neurotransmitters, progesterone, estrogen, testosterone, DHEA, digestive enzymes, stomach acid, all these good things that we want to make us feel good. And lastly, we're going to talk about different ways to enhance healing. I think that there are a lot of lifestyle things that we can do that can be inexpensive and relatively, time efficient so that we don't have to spend our whole life, pounding supplements, doing a bunch of crazy things and still not seeing results. Okay, so first, what is stress? Let's just actually define what stress is. Stress is your body's way of responding to any kind of demand. This can be positive stressors, negative stressors like exercise, things like that. But it can also be, traumas and, toxic relationships, boundaries, those types of things as well. When people feel stressed by something going on around them, their bodies react, like I mentioned, by releasing chemicals into the blood. So if your brain is like, oh my gosh, there might be some sort of threat or danger going on, we better kind of go into second gear here. It's going to start responding by giving you things like cortisol, adrenaline, norepinephrine, these like fight or flight hormones and chemicals. So let's talk about this stress cycle. Let's first kind of talk about the negative stress cycles. Maybe there's a stressor. Maybe you are a perfectionist. You are needing your house to be perfect. You don't want there to be a speck of anything on the floor. You don't want there to be a crumb anywhere. And this is important to you. And then you walk in your house and your kids have destroyed the house. They have had all their stuff everywhere, their toys, their athletic equipment, there's food wrappers everywhere, and everything's in disarray. So your brain looks at that and is like, okay, I want this house to be perfect. That's how I feel safe. And this looks like a mess, super cluttered, crazy, chaos is everywhere. And so then your brain's like, okay, this doesn't feel safe. This isn't okay. This is kind of threatening to who we are and who we want to be and how we function well. So let's kind of stay hypervigilant. Let's kind of turn on those fight or flight chemicals and kind of, have an increase in stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline. So then your body starts to respond as if you were in danger, which is sort of like our body's response of being chased by a bear. Your body responds is like, okay, there's a bear coming, or this clutter's everywhere. We can't function like this. This is dangerous and scary. We don't like this. And over time, your body can heal from this one time. But as you can see, with something like perfectionism or toxic relationships or lack of boundaries or people pleasing or feeling overscheduled, overwhelmed all the time, these things are going to bleed into a lot of different areas of our life and be present a lot of different time of our life as well. So this is not just like the one time that you walked in your house was a mess, this happened, and then we gave ourselves plenty of rest and, time to kind of come down from that, and our fight or flight response, ceased. We had a full resolution of the stress cycle and we feel okay. These things are likely things that you probably never get a break from. Like, there's always something going on. You always hear that from different women. There's always something going on. I'm always putting out fires. I'm overwhelmed. I'm stressed. That's how your brain is perceiving your life. And so when that happens over and over and over and your body doesn't get a break from it, this is when certain symptoms begin, like back pain, neck pain, migraines, IBS symptoms, gas and bloating, period symptoms, irregular periods, breast tenderness, a ton of PMS symptoms, a lot of anxiety, lack of sleep, feeling just exhausted and like a soulful exhaustion, an exhaustion that a good night's sleep isn't necessarily going to fix, even though also sleep is massively impacted by this response. So then we sort of start to get into this cycle where the more that we're in this sort of like negative headspace, the more hypervigilant our brain becomes. We're perceiving our world as dangerous, scary, threatening, horrible, stressful, all those things. And then your brain just starts to go through this cycle over and over and over multiple times in the day, leading to more and more symptoms, like I mentioned, like hormone symptoms, hot flashes, insomnia, night sweats, irregular periods, PMS symptoms, anxiety, panic, depression, overwhelm, IBS symptoms, digestive system symptoms, all of those things, including pain. The good news here is that we can change this. I've gone through this process myself, and I still continue to work on it on a daily basis. And I don't say that to freak you guys out in any sort of way, but I say it as more of an empowering thing, that this is just life's work, and it doesn't have to be hard every day, but it does have to be something that we consciously, look at. I, by nature, am a perfectionist. I like things to be in a certain way. I also am by nature a bit of a people pleaser. I like to make sure everyone's happy and thriving around me, and I sort of do that at my own demise. And by the way, that was something I learned as a child that was very virtuous. Like, that was something that people liked about me. And so I obviously learned that and kept those patterns going, and it's bled into my adult life until I got to a place where I was so burnt out from doing it all the time that I was having a lot of physical symptoms. I was having a lot of mental and emotional symptoms like anxiety, and I was miserable. And so I've started to kind of like over the last decade learn these different tips and tricks and tactics that have been really, really helpful for me in helping calm down that fight or flight response, leading to a healthier, happier body as well. So the positive stress cycle is one where we get that stress. So we get, maybe your boss yells at you and you're like, okay, boss yells at me, not ideal. We don't like that. That feels pretty scary and threatening. We also have, again, that increase in stress hormones, that cortisol and adrenaline just instantly comes because that boss feels really threatening and really scary. The next step though, here's where we can kind of change the script a little bit. So we can actually have positive behavioral response, and that will stop the physical response. So instead of saying like, oh my gosh, yes, this is really bad, my boss yells at me, I'm gonna get fired, then I'm gonna be on the street, then I'm not gonna have any money, then this other thing's gonna happen, and I'm gonna be out of a job, and then I'm gonna be unemployable. That's where our brain tends to go, like this catastrophic brain, because it wants you to be prepared all the time. It wants you to be prepared for all the worst case scenarios so that you've already experienced it, thought it out, exactly what will happen if this worst case thing happens. The problem is our brain doesn't actually know the difference between thoughts and things actually happening. So when you catastrophize, you are making your brain live through that even though it hasn't, which is super unfair to you because you don't need to live through all of these catastrophes on a daily basis because most of them will never happen. And if they do, they usually aren't as bad as we think of them out to be in our brain. So we can actually change this thought process and say like, okay, let's take a deep breath here. Let's calm ourselves down, because remember that when we're breathing up here in our diaphragm like this, that's teaching our brain, that's sending the message of danger, that's how we'd breathe when we were being chased by a bear. If we start to breathe down here in our diaphragm, That's the message of breath that we would give ourselves if things were good and calm and happy and we were content and we weren't being chased by a bear. So we can start there with the message that we send ourselves. How are we responding to this? What's the message? Are we okay? Are we in really big trouble and we are gonna get fired and this is really bad? So then the next thing we do is start to kind of like talk ourselves off the ledge. And this can be, myriad of different things. This can be like, okay, this has happened before. Sometimes this is not ideal, but my boss sometimes does act irrational and takes things out on me, has nothing to do with me. Or maybe you did actually make a mistake and you can say something like, you know what, I tried my best on that project. I did make a mistake. I feel really bad. It was an honest mistake. Like, we're going to be okay. This is just a temporary blip on the radar. This is going to be okay. Or even if you do get fired and you did make like a pretty catastrophic mistake at that job, you can always recover. This is never like the last step for you. You can always kind of, bring yourself into telling yourself that you're going to be okay. We are always okay. You have been okay up until this point. 100% of the time you have handled what's in front of you. So I want you to be take an empowered stance to that you can handle this. You have handled hard things in the past. You will continue to handle hard things. Sometimes life is hard, but if we can give ourselves messages of safety, we are okay. This is not ideal. This is super uncomfortable, but that doesn't mean that we're being chased by a bear. It doesn't mean that we need to be in this fight or flight response, even despite the discomfort that we're feeling. And so think about when you're in these sort of situations, it's all about how you respond to them. And I don't mean like the toxic positivity type of way where only positive vibes only, and we only think positive and we can only have good vibes. I don't mean that at all. I mean identifying what's actually there. If you're angry at somebody, you're angry at your boss, or you're scared or you're sad or you're worried, identify that and let that feeling be normalized in your body. Let that feeling of anger towards your boss be, okay, this is anger. This can be there. This is a normal human response to the situation, is anger toward that person. It's uncomfortable, but it's not dangerous. So we want to just talk ourselves off the ledge that no matter what we're feeling, whatever we're going through, we're still safe. And then once that happens, there is a reduction in physical symptoms. There's a reduction in back pain and IBS symptoms and, heartburn and all the different physical things, the hormonal symptoms, the breast tenderness, the period problems, the pain, the cramping. We have better moods. We feel less anxious. We feel more content. We feel more apt to handle things and more empowered. All of these things are positive side effects of teaching ourselves how to respond to things in a way where we're not constantly in fight or flight, but we learn to take a more empowered stance with them. Let's kind of just chat about what stress does to the body. And I don't want to do this in like a negative way, but I want to teach you because so many people go from doctor to doctor to doctor and they don't get answers. They get their blood tests back or their MRIs back or their imaging back and they're like, I don't know, everything looks fine for you. I'm not sure what's going on. And so I want to explain to you the different things because I think stress can be just sort of like this ambiguous, like arbitrary thing of like, yeah, probably stress. But there are ways, like I said, that stress does cause these things because of the cortisol and adrenaline that takes precedence over things like stomach acid and bile and enzymes and progesterone and lower inflammatory levels and all kinds of different things that happen when our body chooses this fight or flight response versus other ways. It sort of takes precedence, like I mentioned, on, okay, we're in a bad situation here. We're in danger. We're being chased by this bear. We need to just get out of this. We need to send a bunch of blood and oxygen to our brain. We need to dilate our pupils. We need to send, blood pressure to our heart to kind of make us, have more aerobic fitness to get out of the situation. And so if you think about it, it does change us physically and prevents us from doing other things. So just a few things that I just want to chat about. Here's some things that stress can do. It can create lower immune functions. So you can get sick with viruses more often, but also infections and things like that. You can get, like I mentioned, like yeast infections, bacterial vaginosis, those types of things are more common. But also, like I said, colds and flus, strep, things like that your immune system generally can fight off. You also can get a ton of digestive issues, you guys. Digestive issues stem from when we're in this fight or flight response, our mouth is so dry. We are parched, we don't produce enough saliva, and digestive enzymes are in your saliva. So I'm not gonna go into a huge digestive system lesson here, but when we don't have the enzymes in our saliva and that going into the food in our mouth, it's not broken down into our esophagus, which then makes our stomach work faster and harder, and it sort of impacts every single section of the digestive system. And so you really want to make sure that when you eat specifically, that you are not super stressed or angry. You want to sort of like take your ears out of your shoulders out of your ears, take a few deep breaths, be present with your food. Don't just scarf it down really fast. All of those sort of practices are going to lead to things like stomach pains, gas, bloating, heartburn, poor absorption of food, and nutrient assimilation, those types of things. It can also cause things like constipation and diarrhea. So a lot of like IBS type symptoms are actually due to the nervous system. And in fact, a fun fact here is that in our GI system, our gastrointestinal system, we have what's called the enteric nervous system, which is kind of like our second brain. So it's really, really sensitive to stress and heightened nervous system because of that enteric nervous system. So you may notice, if you're nervous that you get like diarrhea or something like that, that can definitely happen, and that's why. Hormonally, different things happen. So if our body's constantly in this huge state of stress and always freaking out and producing tons of adrenaline and cortisol, you're not going to be able to produce things like DHEA, progesterone, testosterone, and these are hormones that make us feel good, build muscle, have good periods, have regular periods, let us sleep well before our period, have less anxiety, have less heaviness, prevent things like clots and cysts and fibroids and things like that. So you can start to notice, different hormonal symptoms as well. You can start to notice more musculoskeletal pain, like neck pain, back pain, head pain, shoulder pain, muscle tightness, joint pain. All of that can happen as a result of stress and an increase in stress hormones. Cardiovascularly, when we're in the fight or flight response, that changes. And so you can have an increased risk of things like high blood pressure, heart palpitations, and an increased risk of even scary things like heart attacks and strokes. So we definitely want to lower these stress chemicals to prevent things like that. And then in our brain, we can start to notice things like an increase in anxiety, an increase in depression, insomnia, feeling overwhelmed all the time, feeling brain fog, feeling like I said, this like soulful exhaustion, forgetfulness. All of these myriad of things are a result of stress for a lot of people. So most of our cells in our body have a cortisol receptor on them. So you really want to be careful and get this stress under control. So like I mentioned, causes of stress can be things like emotional stress, lack of sleep, inflammatory foods, environmental toxins, and injury and illness. These are all common things that can cause stress. I always kind of think about it as a reservoir. We all have a little reservoir where like all of these little things kind of go in over time. I think emotional stress is by far and large the most critical thing to think about. Like I mentioned, this kind of like personality characteristics tend to set the stage, and that's sort of like the lens that we're perceiving our life through, and those things need to be addressed first. Let's talk about food. How to nourish your body with food. The sky is the limit on vegetables. Vegetables have so many micronutrients in them, so many vitamins and minerals and enzymes and antioxidants and great things that are like spark plugs for every single one of our functions to happen. So if you're not good at vegetables, start realistically. If you don't have any vegetables in your life, start with a serving a day. That's all you got to do. If you're somebody who's already having a serving a day, try to go up to 2 servings a day. I think that where people fail in nutrition is that they try to like override their entire life, and that's not realistic. You got to start small and use them like little stairs. So like if you're here, we just want to get to here. We don't need to get to here. We just want to get one step up on the stair. You want to choose good quality animal proteins. I'm a big fan of animal proteins for a lot of reasons, but they have good B vitamins, zinc, iron, selenium, iodine, good quality micronutrients as well. Protein is really helpful for weight loss. It's also helpful for blood sugar regulation. It's the raw materials of neurotransmitters like serotonin and dopamine. It burns more calories when we are digesting it. It helps maintain lean muscle mass. It does a myriad of amazing things for us, and most of us are under eating it. So look at your plate and make sure that you have a source of protein on your plate at each meal. Essential fatty acids are also key. So that's how we produce our sex hormones, is through cholesterol. So you want to make sure that you're getting in your healthy fats like your olive oils and coconut oils and nuts and seeds, avocados, salmon or fatty fish. All of those things are great. Fruit is also super beneficial. A lot of people rag on fruit thinking that it's too high in sugar and it's gonna, do all this bad stuff to us, but fruit is really great for antioxidants, potassium, it has a lot of vitamin C. It's great for us as long as you pair it with some protein. It has a good fiber in there too. So eat fruit for sure. And then occasional foods. I'm not ever a fan of elimination diets and shaming people and telling people to cut out foods. It never ends well. I've been in this industry for 17 years. Doesn't work. So occasional foods are going to be foods more like highly processed, nutrient devoid foods and sugar. And the reason for that is not because they are the devil, but because when you consume more of those types of foods, you tend to then underconsume these other things that we just talked about. So start here with the first 4 and make sure that you're getting in those. And then whatever's left over for you, add occasional foods in there. Okay, so we want to talk about how to change your mindset. Stressful situations are not the stressful situation. And I know that that's like crazy to think about because we're all like under so much stress, but it's not the stress, it's the perceived stressor. So it's not about the stressor, it's how your brain is perceiving this. Is this really dangerous and scary and horrible and awful and threatening? Or is it actually, again, that message of empowerment? It's okay. We can get through this. We can be okay. This has happened before. We've survived every bad thing that we've had in our life so far to this date. That is more what I'm talking about. Make sure that you are perceiving things in an accurate lens. The second thing that I think is super helpful is to actually clean out your emotional basement with journaling. So remember I said that things like anger, sadness, grief, worry, fear, resentment, envy, jealousy, all those things can be present, and they all can coexist with things like happiness, gratitude, contentment, all of the good emotions too. But I want you to remember that we tend to run from all the more like negative emotions. We tend to not like them. They're uncomfortable to feel. We tend to repress them, want to get rid of them, gaslight ourselves out of feeling them. And so I think something that's super helpful is to what I call clean out your emotional basement with journaling. Get it out. Take out a piece of paper. It doesn't have to be like a beautiful bound journal. It just needs to be a piece of paper. Take out a piece of paper and just write. Whoever you're mad at, whatever situation's happening, and don't censor yourself. Make yourself in a safe environment where you're not going to be interrupted by your kids or a partner or whoever, and just get it out. And then at the end, you can burn it, rip it up so that nobody finds it or sees it. But it can be really helpful at just identifying and then also validating what your true experience is. I also think that practicing gratitude is helpful. So I have a little book in my own nightstand that's called Flecks of Gold, and it's a 3-year journal for moms. And you just write a little blip each day about something good that happened. So Flecks of Gold are like just these little things in the midst of like a chaotic life of things that brought you joy or, happiness or whatever. And it's happy for me to just kind of like sit down each night and kind of go through, okay, yeah, even though this day was really hard, my little boy came up and like cuddled me, or my husband did this for me, or whatever. So I think practicing gratitude and just the small little things. So not like I have a roof over my head, but like tiny things that happened that day that actually did make you feel good. Focusing on those things can help your brain focus on those things during the day as well. If you feel during the day like your adrenaline is just going and you're just, breathing really shallowly and struggling, stop yourself, like literally give yourself the time out. Stare at a blank wall, start deep breathing, do something to reground yourself. That symptom or that feeling of adrenaline is, one that's showing that your brain is in the fight or flight response, your brain's detecting danger. You want to sort of interrupt that by saying, nope, we are okay, we're good, and just sort of like let things come back down. I also think, we talked about this a little bit, but giving yourself messages of safety versus danger. So instead of freaking out and breathing shallowly and running around and eating fast and driving fast and walking fast, those are all messages that you would be giving yourself if you were in danger. You want to give yourself messages that everything is fine, we're good, we're happy, we're content, walking slower, breathing deeper, eating slower, hugging your friends and family, thinking less catastrophically, not letting yourself do that, making the conscious decision that you're not going to buy into those scary thoughts, because thoughts are just thoughts. Thoughts are not facts. That can be really helpful. So I always just kind of think messages of safety versus messages of danger when something like scary or hard or stressful comes up in my own life. And then, I think the last two are big things too. I think, writing down your priorities and focusing on those. We have so much noise in our life now with different things to focus on and draw our attention away from. And I think, focusing on what we actually want in life, not what society's expectations are of us, are important so that we live in alignment with what we actually want that makes us happy. And then I also think challenging the perfectionism and people pleasing. And I could have an entire presentation all about those two things as well. And I have lots and lots of episodes on my podcast, The Allie Damron Show, all about this, and other episodes here on YouTube. But challenging your perfectionism and people pleasing are two areas that, again, your brain is viewing your lens or your life through those lenses. So we don't want to be a perfectionist. We don't want to be a people pleaser. Those, like I mentioned, are very virtuous. And a lot of people think that, they don't want to get rid of those things because they get accolades for those things. But in the end, they really do bite you in the butt, and they really are detrimental to our own health, healing, happiness, and how we live our life authentic to ourselves. Here are some simple ways to kind of calm your nervous system. These are like the messages of safety that I mentioned. Guided meditations are always great. Going on leisure walks, spending time in nature and sunlight, deep breathing, identifying and validating your emotions is helpful. And then, like I said, challenging your catastrophic thoughts. Don't do yourself the disservice of sitting in those catastrophic thoughts all the time. Try to work yourself out of those. And obviously a therapist or a great counselor or a religious leader can be really helpful for you for that. And then, obviously in my line of work, there's always supplements and herbs that can be really helpful. I think adaptogenic herbs can help decrease the sensitivity to stressors. So things like ashwagandha, rhodiola, medicinal mushrooms, schisandra berry. There's a whole slew of different herbs that can be helpful. You really do want to work with somebody on this, like that can help you determine if your cortisol level is low or high or where you're at with that. It can be really, really beneficial. L-theanine is great it's an amino acid, and it's known to help kind of ease your anxiety, kind of decrease the nervous system a little bit, stress, insomnia. It's in a lot of like stress, anxiety, and insomnia formulas out there. And then GABA is a naturally occurring amino acid that also works as a neurotransmitter in our brain to make us feel less anxious, less on edge, and sleep better too. So again, please don't just go take these things. Work with somebody who can help you determine which would be best for you, but just know there are great herbs, vitamins, supplements, things like that can help support all of these things. We can't just like step over dollars to pick up pennies and just go through this without doing all the things that I mentioned first. We got to figure out where your stress is coming from to get through all of the different physical symptoms with your hormones and your pain and your insomnia and anxiety that you're going through right now. Well, in my opinion, there are 5 pillars to living your best life. First is mindset, which was the majority of this video. Second is nutrition. Third is movement and exercise. Fourth is sleep. And fifth is vitamins, supplements, and herbs to help support what you're already going through. So I hope that you guys found this video helpful for you. I think this is just such a huge, huge topic for so many people. This is one of the biggest topics that I talk about with my patients because no one's talking about it. So many different functional medicine practitioners out there are saying like, oh yeah, let's just try this other supplement for stress, and you probably should start meditating, and let's take some different hormones and things like that. And they're not talking about what is actually behind this. Like why is our nervous system so heightened and so freaked out all the time? And in my opinion, like what I laid out here is really so much of it. So I hope this was helpful. I have an entire course all about this. Those 5 pillars are my Heal Your Hormones Masterclass It goes through every single one of those in a really individualized way so that you can figure out what would be best for you. So like the vitamin, supplements, and herbs section, I lay that out in a way that you can determine, okay, I'm feeling this way, or I have this, or whatever, and you can figure out what combination would be the best for you. So that is at a deep discount right now at alliedarman.com/heal. I've had hundreds of women go through this program, and most of them have said it's life-changing, had great success in that for all the things that we talked about here today. So go check that out at alliedarman.com/heal if you're interested. If you have any questions, feel free to comment in the comments below. I'm happy to answer them. And lastly, if you haven't subscribed yet, hit that button to be notified anytime I post new content related to women's health, hormones, or holistic health. I'll see y'all in the next one.